Thank you indeed for inviting me to speak to you. I've looked at the program, seen the speakers, and got a feel for what's here in this room, and I'm in awe of the amount of knowledge. Almost all of you know more about agriculture than I do, but anyway, I'm here to do my best. I intend to give a most helpful, constructive talk that I can, and that I can imagine we've been able to hear for centuries. But I warn you, I'm going to be very, very critical as well. Now, I'm not going to be critical of any person, any human at all. I don't know who to criticize for not flying before the Wright brothers learned how to fly. Somebody must have been guilty, but nobody was. And it's the same with agriculture as that analogy. We're in deep, deep trouble today, and it shows itself ultimately in global desertification and climate change, as we're becoming aware of. Now, the symptoms of desertification that you might think is far removed from you in Britain, the symptoms of desertification are increasing frequency and severity of droughts and floods with no change in weather, increasing poverty, social breakdown, abuse of women and children, blaming of minorities, violence, emigration to cities and to Europe, as you're learning, war, and climate change. So these are the many symptoms we're dealing with around the world. Is this a recent problem? No. Many civilizations have failed, more than 20 civilizations. Civilization is city-based by definition. And they've failed in all regions of the world. The only place we've maintained civilization for a long time is Lower Egypt. And it took the destruction of Ethiopia to maintain that civilization. Armies change civilizations, but they continue because the agriculture continues. When we farmers destroy civilizations, we do a good job. They never rise again. And now the threat is global. Now, agriculture is at the base of this. Agriculture is not crop production. Agriculture is the production of food and fiber from the world's land and waters. So fisheries, wildlife, forestry, all of these things are agriculture, and we're using almost the entire planet now in agriculture. Only 6% is arable cropland, roughly. Now, if civilizations have failed in all regions of the world, and now we're threatened globally, why is this happening when we have so much expertise, so many universities, so many research stations, so much expertise that the world's never enjoyed? And now we're facing this threat globally. To understand that, I think we've got to look at some of the research, social research. If you read John Ralston Saul's book, Voltaire's Bastards, he gives a good explanation of why this is happening. That was a bestseller, that book, and in it, what he looked at was, in history, there was a period where there were massive blunders occurring around the world. As you know, the British East India Company apparently had an army bigger than Britain's. They had their own judges, they could pass death sentences. There was the Boston Tea Party, there were endless blunders. All that was to end at the age of reason or enlightenment. And from that time on, we would have no more blundering, because we addressed the cause. According to the best minds in the world in that period, what was causing it was amateur leadership, because you could buy or inherit your position in the army, the company, whatever it was. And so amateurs were leading us, and we were experiencing these blunders. From then on, every organization virtually would be led by highly trained, specialized people. And Napoleon spread that through Europe more than any other leader. And that's what we have today, and have had all my life. So what Saul did was he said, well, let's study that and see what happened. Did the blundering decrease or increase? And if you read the book, you'll find all the research shows that the blundering increased enormously under expert leadership. It got far worse. I'll quote Saul here. He says, reality is that the division of knowledge into feudal fiefdoms of expertise has made general understanding and coordinated action not simply impossible, but despised and distrusted. He goes on to talk about how our experts use language not to communicate, but to protect themselves from criticism. And he says, in many ways, the differences between various languages today are less profound than the difference between the professional dialects within each language. Any reasonably diligent person can learn one or two extra tongues, but the dialect of the accountant, doctor, political scientist, economist, literary historian, or bureaucrat is available only to those who become one. So I think we've got a good indication from the research as to why things have got a lot worse. So let me explain why this happens from further research. As individuals, we do not act at any time to deal with major issues as individuals. We do so through organizations, institutions. We form organizations for very good reason. We need them. We have to have them. They're a good way of pooling capital, etc., getting things done. So we act through our many organizations, our companies, our governments, our universities, our non-profit, environmental and other organizations, our religious organizations. Everything we do virtually is through organizations. So let's look at the research on how organizations function and see if we can make more sense of it there. If you look at system science and ignore their jargon, everything we make, from a toothbrush to everything in this room, the computers we're using, the clothes you're wearing, everything we make, all right, is complicated. It takes expertise to make it. I don't know how to make a watch, a toothbrush, a coat. I don't have the expertise. You cannot make anything without technology. We can't even drink water without technology, a glass, a cup, a pipe, right? So it needs expertise and technology, and everything we make, right up to space exploration vehicles, computers, is complicated. Nothing we make is complex. The things we make do not work if a part breaks. If they run out, battery runs low, fuel runs out, they stop working. Nothing we make is complex. Now, the things we make are mostly made by organizations. Very few individuals make anything you buy. And because our technology is ever advancing and our skill under expertise, which is essential for the things we make, is that technology is advancing so rapidly, it's giving us a false sense of security that we can solve any problem with what we make. Now, let's look at everything we manage: oceans, forestry, agriculture, nature, organizations, everything we manage from the family up. And here we look at our organizations as well, our religious organizations, our political parties, governments, universities, corporations, environmental organizations. Everything we manage is self-organizing. It does not require technology, it does not require expertise, and self-organizing. If a company, entire board dies in an accident, the company carries on. If members of the family die, others carry on. Everything we manage is self-organizing complexity. Nature, organizations, etc. Now, in each of these areas, when we look at them, there are different kinds of problems. And here I'll use their jargon. With everything we make, when problems occur, they're described as kind problems. A rocket doesn't work, space exploration vehicle blows up, whatever, give us a few $1 billion, give us 6 months, a year, we're back on track. Now, with everything we manage, we get a different kind of problem. We get problems we can solve, and we get what are called wicked problems, meaning not evil, but meaning almost impossible to solve. So we have wicked problems in our organizations. Now, once you form an organization, it takes on a life of its own. No organization behaves as you or I would behave. No organization behaves like an individual behaves. So if we look at some of the wicked problems that are causing us to endanger our future, one of them is the fact that it is extremely difficult and very rare for an organization to be able to say, I screwed up. Sorry, I made a mistake. Let's correct it and move on. Organizations tend not to do that. They tend to circle the wagons and protect the organization, even if it means going totally against the very purpose for which they were formed. If you doubt that for a minute, just think Catholic Church. Right? Full of brilliant, wonderful human beings. They've got a clear mission to protect the innocent, the children, etc. And they've known, as an organization, they've known about pedophile priests for centuries, and they protected the priests, protected the church, and went totally against their mission to protect children, innocent, etc. That's not because anybody was being evil. It's because institutions don't behave like a human. Think political parties. I've been watching this for years, and political parties will go to incredible lengths to... That shouldn't have happened. Sorry about this suddenly playing up. Put it far from me, and I would say. If you think of political parties, you'll see them going against their whole purpose and maintaining the party even at the expense of nation, and only not behaving like that in times of war or catastrophe. A second wicked problem is that you can put all of us in this room in an organization, and we're the most perfect people there are, we're wonderful people, etc., but because of how we communicate as humans, fear of offending somebody, fear of it affecting our promotion, and so on and so forth, what emerges commonly lacks common sense and humanity. If you doubt that for a moment, just ask any child in America, does it pay for and make sense for America to produce oil, to grow corn, to produce fuel for vehicles? No, that is stupid. Thousands of brilliant people, far brighter than I, working in institutions are doing that. And how few protest it. If you think of agriculture again for a moment, it's simple common sense that agriculture should be based on the biological sciences. I'd have thought everybody knew that, but because of institutional stupidity, mainstream agriculture is based on what? It's based on chemistry and marketing of technology. That is stupidity. That is institutional stupidity, and we can see that as individuals, but not as institutions. Climate change is causing desertification, is what we're hearing from institutions today. That doesn't make any sense. Desertification began 50, 60,000 years ago. And climate change accelerated rapidly with the development of coal and oil and additions to the damage that desertification was doing. Paris Climate Accord and talks, global desertification, which is a major part of climate change, wasn't even mentioned. Only France even referred to soils and got attention onto soils, I believe. And not a single word at that entire Paris conference was said about the cause of climate change. So these are stupidities, and no individual is being stupid. It's how institutions function. Now, there's another one that's affecting us, and that our institutions always reflect the prevailing view of society in which they're formed. And so if you go into any organization, you'll find the latest technology, the latest software, latest computers, the latest of whatever, because society believes in that. But if new knowledge develops, paradigm-shifting knowledge, counterintuitive, nobody in society believes it. If that sort of knowledge emerges, institutions, organizations will go totally against their nation, their goal, their mission, everything, and lead the ridicule, rejection, and opposition to new thinking. And that they do not change until public opinion shifts. And Lord Eric Ashby did some good research on that, wrote the book Reconciling Man and the Environment, and he used Britain and America as his case study over the last 200 years, looking at how does truly new knowledge get into society. And what he found is it cannot be brought in by your universities, your politicians, your corporations, anybody. It can only come in through ordinary people like us in this room. And when ordinary people, as he expressed it, in the pub, at the cricket field, the school fair, whatever, are saying, when are they going to do it? It is safe for your institutions to change. And I cannot find a single case in history where any institution has changed and accepted new counterintuitive knowledge ahead of the public. So if you look at Galileo, you see what happened to him. You look at Semmelweis, the Hungarian doctor who discovered that if he washed his hands after cutting up corpses before going to the maternity wards, he would save thousands of women's lives. What happened? The experts, the institutions of the day drove him mad. He died in a mental asylum. I'm talking to you today and tomorrow about two new paradigm-shifting ideas, and my treatment has been somewhat similar. Thank God I was insane 50 years ago, so I've survived. I've been banned from setting foot on any campus of any university in Southern Africa for over 20 years, had whole governments try to crush what I'm talking to you about today. It's gone on endlessly, and nobody is being bad. Nobody has bad motive. It's how institutions function. So we need to accept that. All right, so our main actions are always through institutions, and particularly this applies to policies. We do not develop major policies as individuals. We can only develop them on our own farm or in our family. Beyond that, they're developed by organizations. Now, what the research shows us, though, is that while policies are developed by institutions, only individuals can force change. So that's where we come in and become very important. So from that point on, let's get into the constructive side of what I want to say. Let us now revert to the wisdom of individuals. Agriculture was made possible by who? All of the breeds of cattle, the crops, the chickens, the turkeys, the pigeons, the dogs, the gun dogs, the horses, everything we have, the ability to take one weed on the shore of Britain and turn that into 6 vegetables today. Where did all that come from? Which university developed that? Which expert developed that? Which government? Which organization? None. All of that was developed by you, your descendants, people like you, sitting around kitchen tables, sitting around campfires before that. The origin of science, according to one author, and I believe he's correct, didn't come from anywhere but trackers. People who just tracked wildlife is where science originated, right? So we're going to return to some of this wisdom of ordinary people and get away from institutional stupidity, as I call it. We'll start with a simple thing we can all agree on, that if you have a problem, you need to address the cause of the problem. If you don't, you have zero hope of success. Every one of us knows that. All right, so if we were to ask today in society, our media, our institutions, etc., what is causing global desertification and climate change, you would be told without any hesitation that it is being caused by livestock, putting off methane and causing desertification. You can go back in ancient texts and read some of that stuff, and it's being caused by coal and oil. Now, common sense. Livestock are going to be needed for centuries to produce food, milk, hide, whatever, leather. It's how we managed livestock that caused global desertification or led to it, not the livestock. Coal and oil are resources with large carbon molecules. We're going to need them for centuries to produce many products. There's no way in the world a resource can cause a problem. It was management and policies that chose to call coal and oil fossil fuels and burn them at a rapid rate, contributing to climate change. So logically, it is management with 100% certainty that is causing global desertification, climate change, and all the symptoms I read out earlier. Now, what management am I talking about? You've come to this gathering to talk about many practices. I want to take you beyond that, because there are many, many, many practices we can bring into agriculture. But it is how you decide the practices that I'm talking about. That is what management does. So, for example, we can take mainstream agriculture. Today, it is the most damaging industry there has ever been in the history of mankind. Far more damaging than mining, coal, oil, anything. Just taking one figure alone, we're producing more than 20 times as much dead, eroding soil every year as food we need for every human alive today. Just that one statistic. There's no other industry even approaches that in destructive terms. But everything we believe in and all the good practices we have involved in organic, sustainable, regenerative agriculture, I'm not aware of any really new practices there that weren't being practiced by farmers thousands of years ago. Whole civilizations were based on some of the things we're calling new today. And that agriculture of the past, with all those good practices, is the agriculture that destroyed more than 20 civilizations. More civilizations than armies have done. Is that what you want? No. So what I'm talking about is the management that decides which practices are appropriate and where, because most or many are good from all fields. All right, so the management I'm talking about is that broader, deeper management or umbrella management. Now, there are thousands of books on management. There are whole universities, libraries, departments in universities teaching management at various levels. If we take those and we keep peeling the onion, as I call it, and digging deeper, at the end of the day, in any management system in the world, you have to actually make a decision. And you have actually to use a tool. So that's what we need to do, is to peel that onion as we go down. When we do, we find universally there's the same call. So it doesn't matter what level we look at management, from the simplest to the most sophisticated management, identical core always. We manage to improve our lives. We manage to improve our lives, as I said, and in doing so, we're going to take an action, an objective of some sort we're going to take. Now, we have to have a reason or a context. If I say to you, I'm going to light a fire now, you have no idea whether I should or not until you ask me the reason, the context. And if I'm just going to light it, I could burn the place down. If I'm going to light it in a fireplace to warm us or cook our food, it makes sense. You have to have a context or reason for every action. And we always do. We have a context. And it is to meet a need, a desire, or to solve a problem. So think of every action you take on the farm, and it is to meet a need, a desire, or to solve a problem. And occasionally you might take an action without those reasons, very occasional. Now that then is what we do, and then we have to use a tool. If I say to you now, drink some water, how would you do it? If you don't use a cup, some tool, you would have to go to the nearest river and drink with your hands in your mouth. We cannot do anything without technology. All the creativity, the money, the labor in the world can't do anything till you pick up a tool. Now, what tools do we have? We have technology. We've had it for 2 million years. It began as sticks and stones. We could chip the stones and sharpen the sticks. We could not change our environment. Then we got the tool of fire. And once we had fire, we could melt the stones and go into the copper, the bronze, the Iron Age, and everything you see in this room today, the clothing you've got, was made possible by fire. We couldn't move any further without technology till fire. And the only other thing we've ever had is the idea of conservation, protection, probably developed with farmers or pastoralists about 10,000 years ago. So there's your toolbox, a full toolbox. Now, when we make a decision, we always make it on one or more factors: past experience, research, expert opinion, cost, profitability, compromise, fear, law, regulation. You can go on and on. We make the decision in one or more of those ways, and then we constantly adapt because of unintended consequences. So that simple framework is behind every management process there is. And there is where the problem lay. So if we say to ourselves, why is this causing the problem? We have to acknowledge that when we are managing, remember we're not making something now, when we're managing, we're always dealing with a web of complexity: social, cultural complexity, environmental complexity, and economic complexity. And no business in the world is more difficult than agriculture, which is dealing with all of those all the time. So we're dealing with this web of self-organizing complexity. Even in the most sophisticated team of scientists developing policy, for example, you will find that we put together a team because they are fully aware that it's going to have social consequences, environmental consequences, economic consequences, so appropriate experts are put in the team, but then watch what happens, and they will reduce that web of complexity to the problem, because the only reason we develop a policy is to deal with a problem, either existing or that can be foreseen, and thus it is reductionist, and our policies lead to unintended consequences. Now, also, there is no tool in the human toolbox that can prevent global desertification. There is no tool here that can prevent climate change eventually happening, even if we hadn't discovered coal and oil. There is no tool here that can enable us to address 75% roughly of the climate change issue. So we are doomed, it would seem, if we keep on as we are, with management causing the problems we're trying to address. All right, so far I've said management is the cause of desertification and climate change. I've explained why, because it's reductionist in a complex world. We are shifting from a mechanistic worldview to a holistic worldview, and it's simply not possible to deal with the things we have to because we don't have the tools in the tool bag. And nothing I have told you is not just simple common sense. Nothing there has anybody ever really seriously disputed with me. So we have to improve our ability to manage complexity, our organizations and nature, and we have to add livestock properly managed as a tool. So let's look briefly at a holistic management framework which could address our problems. And when we do this, we find the first thing we have to do is to develop a new idea, not in any branch of religion, not in any branch of philosophy or any branch of science, a new idea of a holistic context, a reason for our policies, for our management that involves how we want our lives to be based on our culture, whatever that is, and tied to our life-supporting environment, particularly vital for agriculture, on which all of civilization is built. We can't have a church, an army, anything, as I said, without agriculture. So we need that holistic context. Then we still need to deal with all our needs, our desires. We still have to develop objectives. That nothing there that changes. I've put in red what changes. We have our tools, and we have to add large animals, essentially livestock, because we can handle them more than we can handle wild animals. And now our decision-making is exactly as it was. It's just like we did before: expert opinion, research results, farmers' experience, neighbors' experience, etc. But to this now, we embrace science over beliefs, because there are some deep beliefs of humanity that I'll talk about tomorrow that have assumed scientific validity, even though supported by no science known to us. So we go to embracing science rather than beliefs. And then we have some filters, just that people can learn very quickly, just to see that our action is truly going to be socially, environmentally, economically right in our own self-interest in the context we are managing. Now, at about 1984, and then we assume we're wrong and make the management proactive by monitoring at the point that we would get the earliest warning and be able to adjust. So we developed this in about 1984. We finally got it working. I was helped a great deal at that time by far-sighted people in the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. They were far-sighted individuals acting as individuals. They arranged for me to put 2,000 people through training over a 2-year period in this developing framework. And those people came from the World Bank, USAID, all the agricultural universities, professors, etc. People came from all of the land management agencies, Soil Conservation Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, etc. Now, they helped enormously in the development of this, and we got it working. We got it to the point where we could get consistent results, where we couldn't even in theory cause it to fail. None of us knew about wicked problems. And the result was all further training was banned. And we were set back many years. And the development of this was kept alive by individuals, largely those involved in the Savory Institute today. So let me conclude. Agriculture is the key to civilization. That's why it's so exciting to talk to you today. Agriculture was developed by individual farmers, not by institutions. Now we have major disasters, as we know, culminating in desertification, climate change, violence, and emigration. Now, in this situation, you in the UK cannot be an island unto yourself. We are in this globally now. We either survive globally or we sink globally. So that is very critical for you to understand. Jody and I have just spent 15 days in Spain and Portugal. Wonderful time there and everything. I knew that EU agricultural policy was bad. I didn't realize quite how bad. We were looking at mass institutional insanity as we traveled around Spain and Portugal. The United Nations' latest Sustainable Development Goals had involved millions of dollars in development, hundreds of institutions. If you look at those, not a single one deals with the cause of the problems they're addressing in that vast problem area of North Africa through to China. Today, we've got the youth rebelling, led by people like Greta Thunberg, rebelling and demanding action from politicians. Politicians cannot lead when new thinking is required. What action are the youth demanding? Or are they like dogs chasing motor cars that don't know what to do with them when they catch them? So what action could the politicians take? There is nothing they could take. One of the most enlightening speeches I've heard from anyone in politics came from the President of Zimbabwe at one point, when he was Prime Minister just after our long civil war had ended. He made a speech in which he said, "We do not have a bigger problem than our rising population and our deteriorating environment." He said, "We politicians do not know what to do." I think that's true of every politician. He said, all that we can do is take the advice of our experts, but when it goes wrong, we get the blame. Isn't that true of every nation? I believe it is. So what could we do? I'd like to leave you with a suggestion that as family people, individuals, farmers, researchers, whatever you are, but as human beings, just start calling for policies in the UK, agricultural policy, to be developed holistically. So what would that look like? For illustrative purposes only, let me give you an idea of what that might look like. Remember that agriculture affects everybody. It's beyond party politics. So you would have people insisting, hopefully, that policy be holistic. Who could argue for policy to be reductionist? Very difficult to argue for. Now, what would that look like? You would work to a national holistic context. Roughly, that would be something like this. This is the one I use personally when I travel in other countries, read research, read the papers, anything to try to evaluate for myself what those policies might be like. So a national holistic context would be something like this. We want stable families living peaceful lives in prosperity and physical security, while free to pursue our own spiritual or religious beliefs, adequate nutritious food and clean water, enjoying good education and health, in balanced lives with time for family, friends, and community, and leisure for cultural and other pursuits, all to be ensured for many generations to come on a foundation of regenerating soils, ethical and humane consideration for all life and biologically diverse communities on Earth's land and in her rivers, lakes, and oceans. Who in the nation doesn't want something like that? Now you have a reason, a context for agricultural policy. And now you open it to the wisdom of ordinary people and common sense. And you get ideas from everybody you can. And at this point, you can begin to look also at expert opinion. Let me show you roughly how that would work. You would start with just simple questions. Who should tell farmers what to do? Should laws, regulations, bureaucrats in Brussels, London, Johannesburg, Washington, Beijing, should they tell farmers what to do, or should farmers decide what to do on the land every day? It's logical that you have to return the power to farmers to make decisions every day that cannot possibly be made by bureaucrats in capitals far away or by experts narrowly trained. Right? So once you look at that and you say that the role of government then is what? If it's not to tell the farmers what to do, what would the role of government be? Would there be any role for government? Yes, there would. Government has resources. Government has tax, laws, regulations, extension services, etc. So you would begin to then discuss and get the principle right. In principle, if government should not be telling farmers what to do, what should it do? What it should do is use its resources to encourage or make easy any action by a farmer that is in the national holistic context. It should discourage or make difficult or costly any action that is out of context. That a government can do. Now, how might you do that? And again, I'm just bouncing ideas to show you what could be. You want to influence, so one thing we need is food production in the world to feed ever-increasing numbers of people. Then why charge income tax to farmers? Why do farmers pay income tax? It doesn't make sense to tax people for producing the food that makes civilization possible. That doesn't make sense in a national holistic context. So if you didn't tax farmers, they would tend to produce. Right? Now, we need to be able to encourage or discourage. So how could that be done? We could go to the ideas of somebody like Henry George, the American economist, who wrote about 200 years ago about the wisdom of having a land tax. So if you're farming, you have a variable land tax. Now, if you have a variable land tax that is a fixed cost, what are farmers going to do? They're going to greatly increase production to feed the world. That makes it more profitable to do so. Now, if you have a variable land tax and you think of the context we just read out, absolutely essential to that is covered soil, complexity, not vast monocultures that nobody knows how to manage. Economists said they were manageable. Ecologists never did. So we need to return to manageable size units of land, etc. So how could you do that? Easily. The more enterprises that a farmer has, the more products produced from the farm, the less the land tax. Farmers will do it. They will find out ways to increase the diversity on the farms. We need covered soil. Every child knows, every old lady in tennis shoes in the garden club knows, you have to keep soil covered. You don't need a PhD to know that. Now, if you want soil covered, and that's in the national holistic context, how easy that is. We can observe every farm every day from satellite. The amount of soil uncovered and bare, the number of days it's uncovered and bare, the more that is, the less your land tax comes down. The more any farmer's soil is covered, the lower the land tax. Farmers will keep their soil covered. You don't have to tell them how to do it. They'll find out. Now, you need less soil erosion. more chemicals, etc. Easy. If you could only take one measure of any farm and want to know the most about that land and that farm, what would it be? It would be the quality of the water running off at the lowest point. We've got the technology today to put a concrete blocks there, a recording device, and record the quality of the water. The amount of chemicals, the amount of silt in it can all be recorded, and the purer the water running off the farm, the less the land tax. Farmers then will start to produce clean, nutritious food without anybody telling them how to do so. They are the most creative people. So I'm sure you're beginning to get the idea. You want more families on the land, as we do in my country? Fine. The more people employed, earning a wage and paying tax, because they're employed on any farm, the less the land tax. What is a farmer going to do? He's going to employ more people. You're going to get more people out on the ground. I hope you can see the common sense of that and how easy that would be to do relative to what we do today. So I think that is doable in months. I think it would involve no subsidies. I can not even think how you would ever be paying subsidies to get people to do the wrong thing as we do today. I think that's very doable. I think it would you'd be the first nation to be seriously addressing climate change. No nation is yet taking it seriously. That would begin. I think it would offer real hope for the youth of tomorrow, where nothing is offering them hope today, that I can see. I think for the UK to do something like this would begin to lead the Commonwealth. You are still the centre of the Commonwealth, which is a mighty group of nations that need leadership in this sort of way. I think if you did this, you would begin to change DFID and UK aid, because right now, DFID and UK aid, what do you think they're doing in this brown area of the world? They are increasing their actions, their policies are increasing the recruitment to Al-Qaeda and terrorist organizations involving your army needing to be involved. They're increasing the emigration to Europe, changing the political face of Europe. That's being done from here and America with aid organizations and their policies. So I hope I've given you some simple ideas of how you can begin to change things around. I'll just end with one comment. I have no theory at all. I have worked on the theory of Smuts, Jan Smuts, who many of you will know about. Einstein knew Smuts. They corresponded. They knew about each other's work and understood each other's work. And apparently Einstein made the comment that he believed there were two constructs in nature. There were two constructs in the world that he believed would really change the world. One was obviously his own theory of relativity, and the other, he said, was Smuts, Holism and Evolution, that he wrote in 1926. I believe that will come true. I hope it does. Thank you.